It says we're live again.
Oh, jolly good.
Splendid.
Live. Hello, folks.
Happy Tuesday, everybody.
Greetings.
Hope everyone's in the pink and nobody got flooded out last week.
Oh.
Good grief.
Wow.
It was pretending like it was England, wasn't it? Bring an umbrella. Good grief. So thank you to our little TeaFlix Tuesday warriors for joining us today. And as you know, if you miss it here, you can see it on McCartney.com and also on our YouTube channel. And you can get there by going to TeaFlixTuesdays.com. And that will roll you right over to the channel. So today we're really excited. This is especially on Julie and Lennon's birthday. This is talk about the universe and the karma bringing us together. Laurie is just back from a very successful appearance at the Fest for Beatle Fans in New Jersey. And our guest today is author, interviewer, journalist, and now full-time book promoter, Laurie Kaye. Laurie began her career in radio at KFRC-AM in San Francisco. For years, that was one of the top 40 stations in the nation. She started as an intern, as most great people do, and worked her way up to on-air reporter and anchor. She wrote and co-produced numerous radio rock specials for RKO, for whom Angie used to work. Yeah. See the universe again, including RKO Presents the Beatles, released in 1977, and then later expanded in retitles of The Beatles from Liverpool to Legend. She then moved on to television and film as a writer, producer, and casting director. But the main subject we're going to be talking about today is her wonderful book, Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, My Life Leading Up to John Lennon's Last Interview. On December the 8th, while working for RKO Radio, 20-something rock journalist Laurie co-conducted an interview with her longtime idol, John Lennon. It was to become John's final interview on what tragically turned out to be his last day on the planet. That evening, John was gunned down by a man Laurie Kaye had encountered just before, whom we do not speak his name. I'm going to cry. It was to become John's last and final interview. And she's continued to beat herself up over the failure to recognize this creep and posed a danger, but I don't think she should. As we approach the anniversary every year, it's December, but Laurie reflects on how she rose from a teen runaway from a dysfunctional family to an expatriate studying Balinese dancing in Indonesia to journalist, writer, and producer. Along the way, she's interviewed titans of music from John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Grace Slick, Talking Heads, the Ramones, David Bowie, Mick Jagger, whom she put on hold so that he could listen to her newscast. I love that part. But it was that December day that she shared a love seat with John Lennon that we're here to talk about today. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, and confetti drops from the sky, Laurie Kaye. Hi, welcome, Laurie.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here with you.
Joining us. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
So I've read your book. Really couldn't put it down. And I put it on Kindle so I could take it to bed with me as well. But,
awesome.
So I've prepared a few questions from having read it. Mm-hmm. And let me just
change your glasses.
Reading glasses on.
I should print these out in larger font type, shouldn't I?
for
I understand.
So take us back to the beginning. What first of all drew you to radio, and how did you go from intern to authoring and
anchoring?
There you go. There we go. Wrong glasses.
Well, I started out as a huge rock radio fan, AM radio stations in LA, when I was younger than actually being a toddler, because I had a dysfunctional family, a mother who really didn't want to have me because her husband left her when he found out she was pregnant. So she didn't really want to care for me. So instead, I got a transistor radio from my grandparents with earplugs, and I kept it hooked into my ears all day and all night because I didn't usually have a babysitter or anybody with me. So I listened to KRLA and KHJ. And back in the early days, it was really cool. Everybody from Little Richard to you name it. And then finally, the Beach Boys, and then finally the Beatles, and then going on and on through the rest of my life. Rock radio was thrilling to me.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
I mean, when I was young, again, radio was my kind of refuge in England. We had Fab 208 and Radio Caroline, which were what they called pirate ships, pirate radio, because they would park their ships 12 miles offshore and blast all this international music without having to pay any copyright because they were in international waters. So I grew up on radio as well, but in a different part of the world. But it kept you company, didn't it, when you were a kid?
I still love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then when I was in high school, I was listening to KMET FM mostly because they were playing and introducing me to everybody from David Bowie to Lou Reed. And it was just so exciting and so cool. And they would have amazing contests where you could win albums, which was great because I didn't really have too much money to buy albums and stuff. So I won a bunch. And then I managed to win tickets to the Rolling Stones Nicaragua benefit at the Forum, which was amazing because I'd never seen them before. So I went with a friend that I was taking as my date that night to the show. This was January 1973. To see the Stones at the Forum. And we went first to KMET to go pick up the tickets. And I ran into the office figuring they'd just hand them to me. And they said, no, the disc jockey wants to meet with you and talk to you on air and give you the tickets then. So I went in with him. It was B. Mitchell Reed, otherwise known as the Beamer. Who's sadly passed away. And he started talking to me and listening to my voice and my attitude and said, Laurie, with your voice and the way you talk to me, you should definitely consider a radio career, being on the air. And I thought, oh my God, that's telling me what I need to do. So eventually I did. And what happened was at first I went to UC Santa Cruz, which didn't have any journalism or really radio things that I was interested in. But then when I got to UC Berkeley as a journalism student, a professor in one of my journalism classes said to me after reading a story I'd written, gee, Laurie, this article should be in the newspaper right now. You already know how to write. What are you doing taking classes? You don't need to be in school. Go get an internship. You'll get a job and you can quit school and just start working. So I did. I got the internship at KFRC-AM in their news department. And right away, I started writing shows for them. The first one I wrote was...
Obviously, just must have had a flair.
It was amazing. And the first one I wrote was all about the Bay Area's fight against fat. And they loved that because I co-produced it and used music in it from John Lennon from his rock and roll album and all that kind of stuff from other bands writing about weight gain or weight loss. And it was really popular. And then I was hired by KFRC very shortly after, quit school at UC Berkeley and became their news editor and then eventually a newscaster and their rock radio interviewer and show writer. So it was great. That's what I did for the next years.
The universe just delivered you into the spot you needed to be, didn't it?
That's right, absolutely.
I really think that's, if you just let yourself follow the path that's laid out in front of you. Sometimes there are left and right choices, but if you're of good moral character like you are, you know how to make the right choice. But what a career and all the people you've met. Before we get on to the John Lennon story, you saying you were the rock and roll radio interviewer. Did you have butterflies? Were you nervous when you were interviewing these people? And how much research could you do in the days before the internet, as outside of their obvious music careers?
Well, this research, was in the 70s, was strictly by books. So I would go to bookstores and get every book that I needed to about the Beatles or whatever. And I was a huge punk rock fan. So when I got to interview the Ramones, I was so excited. It was like, wow, I can't believe it. And then I got to interview Talking Heads too. And they were amazing. And the cool thing is I've stayed friends with Chris France, one of the creators of the Talking Heads and the drummer. And he wrote on the back of my book, you'll see what he thought of my book when he read it, when I gave it to him, when it
It's great.
just before it was published, and he loved it. So he's been very flattering, as well as
That's nice.
so many
Good.
other people have.
You know, it's kind of a symbiotic relationship with showbiz and journalism, right? You have to, you know, one hand washes the other, right? If you're nasty, if you're just a dick to a journalist, they're not going to ever write anything nice about you or show up and review your concert. So it's very heartwarming to hear that there are big, you know, creative brains. Like, I mean, the creator of the Talking Heads doesn't get much more creative than that. Staying in touch and you know, giving you a testimonial for your book and appreciating the work, because without journalists and without bloggers and columnists and podcasters, people wouldn't be aware of, you know, a lot of these artists and a lot of their releases, right?
No, that's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, even with my knowledge, and God knows I'm 95 years old, so I've read a lot of books and been to a lot of concerts, but I still learn some things from your book, little background stories about just how people reacted and how they behaved with you. It just gave me another insight. It's very interesting. And apart from John Lennon, did you have any particular encounter with any of these people you've interviewed that stands out above all?
Well, my first Fab Four member interview was actually George Harrison.
Oh.
And that was at the tail end of 78, right after he got married to Olivia, and they had their son, Danny.
Yeah.
And he was so excited to talk to me about that. And that interview was actually for two specials, not just the syndicated version of RKO Presents the Beatles. The name was changed to The Beatles from Liverpool to Legend, which I'd come up with originally.
Right.
And we expanded it to 17 hours and added more from the George Harrison interview that I did solo.
Wow.
And then also I was interviewing him for another special, lengthy special, that I was writing for RKO called The Top 100 of the 70s.
Wow.
And so that was incredible too. And then after that, about 6 months in June of 1979, was when I got sent with my RKO radio team, Dave Sholin, the music director at KFRC, and Ron Hummel, our engineer producer, to London to interview Paul and Linda McCartney and their latest lineup of Wings, which included the late, great Denny Lane at that time. And they were amazing. And we got to take a picture together. It was so cool. This is the picture of me and John and Linda. And I loved it. And they were both so friendly and hugged me and kissed me. And it was a great time. And then after that, about 7 months after that, I got to interview George Martin, the Beatles producer.
Man.
And he came to the radio station, KFRC in San Francisco, and I did a solo interview with him about his book, which was All You Need Is Ears, his biography that he wrote, which was amazing. And I still read it all the time. It's still great. And he was so complimentary to me because he'd listened to the Beatles from Liverpool to Legend on the radio in England and loved it, said it was the best Beatles special he ever heard, which to this day makes me feel great. So, and then after that, of course, was just less than a year later, turned out to be John Lennon's last interview on December 8th, 1980, which is still something I consider both the best and the worst day of my life.
I'm sure.
The interview ended mere hours before he was shot and killed, which still really hurts me.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
take
sure.
us back to that when you knew you were going to the Dakota. So you're going to be flown out with your production folks. It's close to Christmas. It's a great, beautiful time in New York. All the decorations are up after Thanksgiving. So, you know, you presumably flew to New York, stayed locally and prepped for the interview. What kind of prep went into something like that? And were you made aware by them that Yoko would or wouldn't be there?
Well, we knew that Yoko was going to be there, which was exciting because I was a huge fan of hers too. I still am. Yeah. But what I should say is Double Fantasy had just come out and we listened to it and really loved it. Just the songs were amazing. Starting Over, especially, I loved. And the thing is, though, is we didn't have a day chosen to do the interview yet. So Yoko had her astrologer's assistant call us all, me and Dave and Ron, the RKO team, and also the record company executive who came with us, Bert Keane, who just passed away, to ask us our birthdays and time of birth so they could determine what would be the best day to do the interview. And believe it or not, they came up with December 8th to be the best day, which to this day still makes me feel guilty for the date and time I was born. It was like, oh my God, how did that
happen? Just the reverse.
No.
You were the chosen one to be in that
his
group.
company.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, John and Yoko were supposed to be, they were scheduled to be on the West Coast and in Hawaii during that week and not be in New York on December 8th. But they changed their plans because the person for Yoko said, yeah, do it on December 8th. So we flew out the day before. And it was an incredible flight because I sat there the whole time coming up with the questions for all of us to ask. And we had been told, don't talk to John about the Beatles. Don't ask him about his past. This is all about the present and going forward and Double Fantasy and what they're doing now and his life now. And so I made a point of that, especially because on the plane, I also read the Playboy interview that had taken place the weeks before. And John was pretty irritated when the writer of that was asking him about his past and the Beatles. So I knew not to do that. But the funny thing is, we get to the interview and we talk about a bunch of stuff, and John brings up the Beatles, and he brings up his meetup with Paul, which was incredible, and his original meetup with Yoko at the art gallery. And so that was great.
Yes, sure.
I think, obviously you were, and it may be because of your difficult relationships with each of your mothers. John was obviously, as we all know, very tuned in and very spiritual, and he could immediately tell a good guy from a bad guy. And maybe he sensed something in you, a kindred spirit, that made him feel comfortable enough to just open up and talk about the Beatles, because he would know that that's the gold that you want, but he would also know that you've been told not to talk about it. So that's his gift to you for making him feel comfortable, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We had a lot in common family-wise. Mother and father, because I have never met my father, and he finally did later in his life. But also what we had in common was he brought up at one point about how much he loved Bali. How he went there, to stay on vacation, and he told all of his friends what a great place it was and sent them letters. And I told him that's exactly what I did, because I lived there. I studied Balinese dance. And he was really happy to hear that. And I couldn't wait to talk to him more about that, because we made plans at the end of the interview to all get together in San Francisco in a couple weeks and go to eat at Yoko's favorite Japanese restaurant, which excited me, not just because I'm a sushi and sashimi fan, but because I wanted to talk to Yoko about relationships and how to deal with it, because I hadn't had any lengthy lasting ones yet. And I knew she and John could help me out, and I wanted to talk to John more about Bali. And unfortunately, of course, that never happened, because he was shot and killed mere hours later, and it was tragic.
Yeah, it just the happenstance of it. Still, I was in England hanging wallpaper in our office near the Sandringham estate in England. And I'll never forget it. It was just green and white bamboo patterned wallpaper. We got the news. We were fortunately upstairs from a pub. We went downstairs and just sat there and drank nips and sort of just stared at the floor going, it can't be true. It's got to be, misreported. And of course it was true. And we all went home. The next day I went back and I thought, well, what would John Winston want me to do? Carry on. Life goes on. And I carried on hanging the wallpaper. And it wasn't until a week later, I put the desk back in and I looked
upside down.
The rest of the wall that I'd done half the wall called, got the news, gone back, finished it the next day. I'd hung it all upside down. The pattern didn't match. So forever I walked in that room. I was like, I knew the precise place I was when I heard the news because the wallpaper. And I'm sure he's laughing his ass off. You know, it's just the silly things that bring it back to you. You mentioned that you were going to ask, Ange.
Yes, the assassin, whose name we won't bother with, harassed you, didn't he? He spoke to you on the way in, and he asked you about.
Oh, was it the way in or the way out, or both?
Well, I should say first a bit more about the interview itself, which was really incredible because John started talking out when he came about being a house husband and raising his son, Sean, and how happy he was to be able to, because he hadn't had a chance to raise Julian like he was raising Sean, because he was so busy with the Beatles recording and writing and going on tour. And so that was really exciting to hear. But after a while, I just said to him, gee, John, what I really want to know is I want to ask you about getting the urge to make music again, finally. And I emphasized that, and John burst in with his super loud, funny, and affectionate reply. Oh, it came over me all of a sudden, love. I didn't know what came over me. And we all laughed. And I said, I know, it's like you were possessed. And he said, I was possessed by this rock and roll devil, you know? And I just laughed so much. And John said, was that your question? Is that what you wanted to ask? And he said, did I interrupt you? And I said, oh, no, not at all. You're great answering the questions. And then he answered more, and he said, and just suddenly I had, like, if you'll pardon the expression, a diarrhea of creativity. And that's how Double Fantasy came out. So that was wonderful. And during the whole interview, I was sitting next to John on a love seat, just inches away. And he was so encouraging, and he was probably the most validating person I ever interviewed. And he would look at me and push down his glasses over his nose and say, yes, love, that's it. Exactly. I love your question. And that made me feel great. So it was amazing throughout the entire interview. And that's why towards the end, when he offered to hang out and autograph for me what Yoko was autographing, which was the book that I brought with me. It was Yoko's book, Grapefruit, that John had written the introduction for, and they autographed it beautifully and lovingly for me. And I put the autograph in my book. So everybody now has Yoko and John autographs. And the cool thing is that when John said, please let me autograph it too, I said, of course, John, that would be amazing. And he said, well, what you should know is I love it when people autograph their books for me. And I said, John, if and when I write my book, I will sign it for you and send it to you. And he said, wow, great. And I said, oh, great. And it made me feel wonderful, because I thought, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to autograph it and send it to John. And of course, unfortunately, he was shot and killed hours later. So I wish I could send it to him in heaven. And I did get to give a copy to his son, Sean, who I finally met up with last year. And the thing that I really wanted to ask Sean was, did Yoko ever give you the toy that I brought with me to the interview for you? And 40 plus years had gone by, and I'd never gotten connected with Sean, so I didn't know. But finally, I met up with Sean at a screening last year of his film War Is Over, which eventually won the Academy Award. And I told him that I was on the team that had conducted the last interview with his father, and so he was really happy to meet me. And I gave him a signed copy of my book, and he was really thrilled about that. And I said, please give it to your mother too. I want Yoko to read it as well. And I said, but I have to ask you, did she give you the toy that I brought for you? And he said, toy? What toy? And I said, it was a wind-up metal dragon that was fire-breathing, and your father loved playing with it and said that he might not give it to you because he might want to keep it himself. And Sean looked at me and said, oh my God, that was my favorite toy as a kid. So that thrilled me, and it still thrills me to this
Sure
day.
it does, yes.
Oh, how amazing.
And after the interview, the guys on my team were going back to the West Coast, but I wasn't. I was staying the night in New York to hang out with a friend of mine and go to dinner and spend the night at his his new apartment in New York. And we all left, and John and Yoko asked if the guys could give them a ride to the recording studio where they had their session booked because their limo wasn't able to take them. So the guys said yes, of course. And as we went out to the limo to get it ready for them, this creepy guy came up to us and looked at us and said, did you talk to him? Did you get his autograph? What'd he say? What'd he say? What'd he say? And Bert Keane from the record company wanted to shut him up. So he gave him a copy of Double Fantasy. And when John came out, he said, John, please sign it for this guy. Keep him quiet. So John did. And then John and Yoko got in the limo with the guys. We all hugged. And I said goodbye. And I said, I can't wait to see you in a couple weeks in San Francisco. And they drove away. And the minute they drove away, this creepy guy came back and started following me up the block on my way to my friend's office. And once again, following me and saying, did you talk to him? Did you get his autograph? What'd he say? What'd he say? What'd he say? And I wanted to smack him, and I kept turning around and saying, leave me alone. Go away. Stop following me. But he didn't, and he wouldn't. And finally, I acted like I was going to smack him. And he finally turned around and walked away. And I realized from that point, gee, what I really should have done was gone to the Dakota security department and said, get rid of this guy. He's going to bug people, and you really need to. And unfortunately, I didn't. And I got to my friend's office and told him what a great interview we'd had. And we went to dinner, and then we went back to my friend's apartment. And as he was about to open the door, he said to me, when I open it, you are going to hear the radio because I turn it on. So in case anybody tries to break in, they'll think I'm here and they'll go away. So he opened the door, and there was music for 1 second. And all of a sudden, a reporter came on saying, John Lennon has been shot. And he's at the hospital. And he named the hospital, the Roosevelt Hospital. And I screamed, and I immediately ran into the street, caught a cab, went to the hospital. And I looked in the big glass door, through the big glass door, and saw Yoko crying hysterically in the lobby and holding on to her friend. And I wanted to go in and comfort her, but I realized, oh my God, no, I'll just make her feel more tragic because I'm the reason that they were there that day and that John Lennon got shot. And just watching her cry so drastically, I thought, John wasn't just shot. John was killed, and I knew it, so I didn't go in because I didn't want to bother Yoko anymore. But what I did was I went to the phone booth right next door to the hospital and called the RKO radio network in New York and told them what was going on. And they said, come here immediately. So I spent the entire night at their New York setup and doing interviews with international and national print writers and radio personalities and stuff. And then the next morning they put me on the Today Show, and then I left immediately and flew back to San Francisco and immediately listened to the full interview and cried through the whole thing and started writing the special that originally wasn't supposed to air until February 14th on Valentine's Day, because Double Fantasy was a loving album. But now it was going to air the special within mere days of John getting shot and killed. And I named the special John Lennon, the Man, the Memory. And it aired the Sunday after he was assassinated. And it was 3 hours long and contained a major part of our interview, which was many hours long as well. And that day still lives with me. And as I told you before, I still consider it both the best and the worst day of my life. And the 45th anniversary this coming December 8th.
Yeah. But a lot of our crowds, Elizabeth's saying here, it wasn't your fault. This guy, the assassin, was hell bent. If they'd have shoot him off that day, he'd have come back the next day, the next week, the next month. Somebody here is saying, Mariana is saying, if you'd have gone back to the Dakota security and he'd seen you going to the security, would they have done anything? He might have shot you. You cannot beat yourself up, sweetheart. You really can't.
I know everybody tells me that, but the thing is, had I looked at him more carefully, maybe I would have realized he had a gun in the pocket of the coat he was wearing. And if I'd taken him to the security team at the Dakota, because they're that kind of
building, yeah, sure,
people, they might have seen the gun. They might have called the police. The police might have gotten rid of him. I mean, I just can't feel guilty. I can't.
No.
I try and improve myself over the last nearly 45 years, but unfortunately I can't get rid of all the guilt. It's still on my shoulders and still in my head.
You're much loved by our crowd. Everybody here is sending hearts and love for just what you've gone through. I mean, it was bad enough for us as, people who knew him and the fans, and God knows, Julian and Sean and Yoko and the family. But it must have just been absolutely incredulous to you, like, wait, 2 hours ago, I was sitting on a love seat with this guy, and now he's not here anymore. How long did it take you to actually process that?
I don't know that I have actually processed it, to be honest. What happened was, for days and weeks after the interview, all I could think about was, oh my God, I want to get out of radio. I don't want to interview any more rock stars. I'm hurt, I'm guilty. But the thing was, I had already made commitments to RKO Radio to interview a number of musicians. And so within a week of the John Lennon and Yoko Ono interview, I interviewed 2 others. I had to interview oh gosh, who was it? I'm not thinking now. Barry Manilow and Neil Diamond right away. And they were good interviews, but still I felt bad during the interview thinking, oh gosh, do I really want to do this? Right. And so I stayed in radio for a while, and then I went over to print and did incredible interviews for Rock Magazine, including Little Richard, who was not just a big Beatles fan, but of course the Beatles were a huge Little Richard fan. So that was wonderful. That was a really lengthy, great interview to do. Wow. And so many more after that. And then I eventually moved to New York and got into video and TV and did that for years and years, and eventually moved back to LA and continued doing that, everything from music videos to then TV and all kinds of stuff.
Now, you worked with the Dick Clark organization, didn't you, for a while?
Absolutely, and that was great because not only did I write his weekly radio show, which was really cool, but he loved my writing, and he said, Laurie, will you ghostwrite my nationally syndicated weekly newspaper column? And I said, yeah. And I got to go to concerts and do interviews and write about them as though I were Dick Clark. So that was really wonderful, especially going to the US Festival, which was days long, and, getting to say I was Dick Clark. So that was really cool. And Dick was incredible. I was so sad when he died too.
I interviewed him once in Nashville for, I think it was Australian TV or French Channel 5. I was doing peripatetic interviews for, overseas outlets and stuff. And I interviewed him at their Nashville offices. What's his son's name? Rack Clark? I think it's Rack. and he were both there, and they were absolute gentlemen. I mean, here's me from some little rinky-dink outlet in, Wagga Wagga, Australia. But they gave me all the time of day, and they were telling me about, the Country Music Awards and all of that stuff. And it was a lovely, lovely time. I don't know what happened to the interview. I turned in the tape and off it went.
Yeah.
In the days before the internet, it was really hard to track that stuff down. These interviews you've been talking about today, are they archived anywhere? Can we hear them anywhere?
Well, the thing is, unfortunately, the RKO radio interviews, RKO radio is not in business anymore, and they were sold to another company who own the interviews and the radio specials. So technically I can't. And although a lot of them are illegally on YouTube, I'm not supposed to say that.
No, of course. We don't want to go bootleg anything. That's not our crowd. We always want to, go through the right channels and the copyrights and stuff. But wouldn't you think whomever bought RKO, and Angie used to work for RKO Home Video out here, so you gals have that in common. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you think that people would see that as a gold mine for podcasting and resurrect them and clean the audio and remix them? And
podcasting in those days.
Now, wouldn't you think that they would see that content as a podcast gold mine for today?
When I do live TV and radio shows, often I do play pieces of the interviews. And actually, starting on December 8th of this coming year, the 45th anniversary, there will be a Netflix documentary about John Lennon's last day that will be starring me and Dave Sholin and Ron Hummel. And they'll be playing lots of the interview as well, because they got legally permitted to do so. So you can catch that on Netflix. That's going to be really cool.
Great.
That will be cool. We had a lovely guest on a couple of weeks ago. You may have met her at the fest, Debbie Gendler. She was in the audience of the Ed Sullivan show when she was 13. She wrote in and won tickets. And she then was spotted by, eventually her career became producing, and she is now working as not just an archivist, but a historical correctionist with Andrew Salt, who owns the Ed Sullivan archives at edsullivan.com. And so what they've done is they've seen the value of the gold mine of all of the Ed Sullivan content. And if you go to edsullivan.com, you'll see all of the videos there, including the Beatles performances and everybody else they had on. It's too bad that the RKO new owners haven't, or maybe they're in the process of organizing it, but I would listen to your interviews over and over again.
Well, I should tell you, I do know Debbie, not only through a friend of mine who was her co-producer, but also because we shared a table at the last Beatles Fest in 2024. And then this year, in 2025, just in March, we were at neighborhood tables, so I got to see her again, and her book is great. And she also came to the launch, my book launch for Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, my life leading up to John Lennon's last interview, and bought my book, and I autographed it for her, and she really liked it, told me how much she dug reading it. And she's great, and she's had great contact with
she is
Paul
awesome.
McCartney especially, and just she's wonderful, and her book is great too.
Our friend Karen who's tuned in from Edinburgh in Scotland is asking, Laurie, did John comment on your red hair? Because he also had red hair, which was a common bond when John met a young Andrew Gold, who was our client. We built the first AndrewGold.com. How funny. And he says, I've heard Andrew Gold tell the story. You have great hair. It looks Scottish. Did John ever make were you a redhead then, or were you dyed?
Well, actually, I'm more of a redhead now, to be honest. I was slightly red then. But no, John didn't comment on my red hair. It would have been cool if he did. But like I said, it wasn't as red then. But we did take a photo together. You can see on my book cover, that's the black and white version. But the color photo is really cool, of the three of us, John and Yoko and myself.
On your shirt, right?
Yeah. Well, the shirt is the black and white book cover.
Yeah, but it's that photo.
That photo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the on if you go to my website, you'll see the color photo, and the website is confessionsofarockandrollnamedropper.com, and there's the color photo of me and John and Yoko, and the color photo of me and Paul and Linda, and so many other photos and podcasts and TV appearances and radio shows and all that stuff too.
That's great. And if you look at the crawl across the bottom, wind this back and you will see Laurie's website is down there. You can connect with her there, and also on Facebook, and it's Laurie, second name Kaye, and on Facebook, and Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper.com. And that's rock and roll, of course. What do you hope readers take away from your book, not just about rock and roll, but about sort of life and resilience and following your path and finding your voice in general?
Well, I basically wrote my book because not only did I want them to know that I had done what tragically turned out to be John Lennon's last interview, but I wanted them to understand how rock radio changed my life, my being raised by a dysfunctional family, how it just made me feel so great and be able to run away from home as a teenager and start my own lifestyle and all of that. And that's exactly what music did with radio. And that's why I was so glad when B. Mitchell Reed told me to become an on-air radio person. And, that just told me what to do. And that informed my life. It's just been amazing.
And you're still rocking, lady.
Music is a food group.
Absolutely. I still go to so many concerts, and I'm so excited because next week on April 18th, I get to go see one of my all-time favorite bands, AC/DC.
Oh, boy.
Huge heavy metal fan. In fact, one of the things I did later when I was creating and producing video music magazines for BMG was I created Country Music Video Magazine, and I produced Metalhead, which was hard rock magazines. So it just made me love it even more and listen to AC/DC all the time. So the idea of getting to see them at this late date is just so thrilling. And there's so many other bands I loved seeing. Recently, one of the best shows I saw, the Steve Miller Band. They were great. Just amazing. And I just love almost all of their songs too. So I go to shows whenever I can.
That's great. When you were talking about being, the radio was your companion, there's a great song. It's not often played on the radio anymore, but it's a Journey song called Raised on Radio.
Yes.
Steve Perry, I love that song. Steve Perry is just one of the greatest voices of our generation too. And a lovely man. Absolutely lovely man.
Well, I should mention that every single chapter in my book, Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, my life leading up to John Lennon's last interview, has 18 chapters, and every single one of them is named after one of my favorite rock, pop, or music songs. And Raised on Radio is one of them.
That's right.
Imagine is one of them. And there's so many of them that I hope everybody checks them out, and it's really cool. And that was really fun for me to do.
A couple of the people in the chat have just ordered the book, so you should see some orders coming through just live from today. And then when we on McCartney.com, you'll be able to see this, and also on our YouTube channel, which you can reach via TeaFlixTuesdays.com. So thank you so much. I know how crazy busy you are, and you're just back from the fest. So thanks for carving out the time for us today. It's been a real honor and a pleasure to meet you. And you put us, even though it made me sad, you sort of put us in the room with John and Yoko on that fateful day. And it sounds like he had a lovely afternoon on the last day of his life. So thank you for that.
It sounded like he had a great time too. And it actually sounded like Yoko did too. So I was thrilled at that part. And thank you so much for having me. And it's been so great to meet up with you and see you. You're two beautiful, young-looking twins, is what it looks like to me.
There must be some Vaseline on the screen, I think.
Two Medicare proud card holders. Never mind American Express. We've got Medicare for as long as it lasts.
And I know you don't live that far from me. So if you ever want to get together, I would love to get together with you in person.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So Martin is asking limerick time. So our regular viewers will know that the limerick lady here, who's she has a book called Mrs. McCartney's Liverpool Limericks and Other Random Irish Haikus, which is all about Liverpool and the Beatles and the soccer clubs and all of that stuff. So she just really likes writing limericks. And so if you are sitting comfortably, here's your little thank you limerick gift for spending time with us today. Are you ready, Debbie? Laurie.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. And a 1, 2, 3. In radio's realm she did play, at RKO making her way. With Beatles in mind, Laurie's book you will find, a name dropper's tale on display. The Dakota so calm and serene, she and John spoke about all of his dreams. His last words on air, she is honored to share, a moment now etched in the scene. Ta-da! There you go.
Beautiful. Thank you. I can't wait to have lunch or dinner with you or something like that. Let's get together.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much.
Fun. Absolutely. And you guys can go see this later on today at McCartney.com and also TeaFlixTuesdays.com. And we will be back next week and we will send you all love and see you guys all of a sudden. Ciao, ciao.
Can I mention one more thing?
Yes.
I just want to say that if anybody wants me to autograph a book for them, they can order it from me. I can send it to them. Or if they're local in LA, I can bring it to them in person. And also, if they want to come to the Los Angeles Times Festival for books, that will be great. I will be there at the Reader's Magnet Arena. Selling and signing and discussing my books, and I'll be happy to do it for everybody.
Absolutely. And that's confessionsofarockandrollnamedropper.com. Get your autographed, personalized copy there. Yeah. All right, kids, we'll see you next week. Lots of love to you all. Stay safe and just love. That's all.
Bye.
That's all you need, right?
Thank you. Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.